I was in the middle of wrapping up some emails when my phone buzzed, breaking my concentration. The message from my wife stopped me cold. Stuck at office party, running later than expected. Going to crash at a colleague's place tonight. Don't wait up. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I stared at the screen for a long moment, my mind racing. This was strange, too strange. In 8 years of marriage, I'd never heard anything like this. She'd never stayed at a colleague's house before, not once. I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. The office parties always ended by 9 p.m., and it was barely 8:30. It didn't add up. My instincts were screaming at me, but I tried to dismiss them. Maybe I was overthinking it. Maybe she just wanted a break from the chaos at home. But then, my curiosity got the better of me. I quickly typed a response, my fingers moving faster than my thoughts. Perfect timing. I'm not alone tonight either. I pressed send and leaned back in my chair, waiting for the inevitable reply. It came seconds later, an unanswered ring, then voicemail. I didn't pick up. I wasn't ready to hear what she'd say. A quiet tension settled over me as I stared at the phone. Something was off. I couldn't place it, but it felt wrong. I stared at the message again, my thumb hovering over the screen. I knew what I was doing. I was pushing back, making sure she felt the weight of what I was starting to suspect. My pulse quickened as I typed my response, a hint of defiance in my words. Perfect timing. I'm not alone tonight either. There. Let her think on that. I set the phone down, trying to focus on my work again, but the words kept looping in my head. The silence between us felt like it was growing, stretching further with each second that passed. I could feel the weight of the situation starting to settle on my shoulders, but I didn't pick up the phone when it rang just moments later. I didn't need to hear her voice right then. The voicemail would come, and when it did, I wouldn't listen. The longer I let it sit unanswered, the more I felt like I was stepping into some strange, unknown space, where nothing felt quite real, but I knew that whatever was coming next, it was going to change everything. 20 minutes passed before the doorbell rang, pulling me out of my thoughts. I walked over and opened the door to find Zoe standing there, a bottle of wine in one hand and a grocery bag in the other. "Ready for our family dinner?" she asked, stepping inside without waiting for a response. I froze for a second. Family dinner? My wife had specifically asked for this night. She had organized it weeks ago, wanting us all to gather for a quiet evening. But now, here I was, hearing from her own sister that the dinner was still happening, and she was nowhere to be found. Zoe smiled, oblivious to the conflict brewing in my head. Mom's parking. She brought her famous lasagna. I set my mouth into a tight line. This dinner wasn't just a spontaneous thing. My wife had wanted it. She'd made the effort, planned it. And yet, here I was, about to sit down to a meal with her family while she claimed she was at a colleague's house. It didn't add up. I set the table for 4, my thoughts tumbling over themselves, and tried to ignore the sinking feeling growing in my stomach. The message had seemed so simple, so casual. But the more I thought about it, the more it felt like a lie with layers I wasn't ready to peel back. And yet, here I was, surrounded by her family, her sister, her mother, all of them expecting her to walk through the door any minute. But I knew she wouldn't. The door opened and my mother-in-law stepped inside, her usual warm smile greeting me. But when she looked around the room, her eyes narrowed slightly. "Where's my daughter?" she asked, scanning the space as if expecting my wife to appear any second. I forced a smile, trying to keep things light, but the words came out flat. "Funny story," I said, pulling out her chair. "She's apparently sleeping at a colleague's house tonight. Some office party ran late." Her expression shifted in an instant. The smile faded, replaced by a furrowed brow. "That's odd," she muttered, more to herself than to me. Zoe, who had been busy pouring wine, paused mid-pour, her eyes darting to me. "She organized this dinner, right? She specifically asked me to bring the wine she likes." My stomach tightened. It was a small detail, but it made everything feel more real, more wrong. My wife had arranged this night. She was supposed to be here, but instead I was sitting at a table with her family, all of us playing our roles while she was nowhere to be found. I looked down at my plate, my fingers gripping the edge of it. The silence hung in the air, thick with questions none of us were asking directly. And then it hit me again. How could she be planning a family dinner and then disappear to a colleague's house without a second thought? It didn't make sense. The door slammed open, and there she stood, my wife, breathless, looking like she had just stepped out of a five-star restaurant. Her makeup was perfect, her dress hugging her like she was meeting someone important, not coming home after an office party. She froze when she saw us all sitting at the dinner table. The three of us, waiting. I didn't miss the flicker of shock that passed over her face, quickly masked by confusion. Then came a touch of panic. "Surprise?" I said, raising my glass to her. My tone was calm, too calm. "Hope you don't mind that I'm not alone tonight either." Her eyes darted between me and the others, and for a moment she looked like she was trying to piece together what was happening. "I texted you that I was staying at?" She started, her voice faltering. "A colleague's house?" I finished for her. "Yeah, I got that message." I watched her face, looking for any hint of truth, any crack in the carefully constructed lie. She hesitated, and I could tell that something was slipping. The narrative she'd been trying to control was starting to fall apart, and I was ready to let it happen. "So," I continued, setting my glass down slowly, "did you change your mind, or did your colleague change theirs?" She didn't answer immediately, her lips pressing together in a tight line. But I wasn't done yet. I had to know. "Which colleague were you planning to stay with?" I asked, my voice steady. "The married one you've been texting so much lately?" The color drained from her face completely. Her eyes widened in horror. I'd struck the first real blow. Her face went pale, the realization settling in, and for a moment she just stood there, frozen. I could see the shift in her posture, the slight recoil, the tightening of her jaw as she tried to gather herself. "What are you talking about?" Her voice cracked slightly, but she was trying to play it off, to steer the conversation away from the truth. I didn't let her. I knew where this was going, and I wasn't going to let her control the narrative anymore. "Our shared laptop," I said, my words sharp, cutting through the air between us. "Your messages sync automatically. You might want to remember that next time you're making plans with Gordon from accounting." Zoe nearly choked on her wine. My mother-in-law set down her fork, her gaze locked on her daughter, a look of shock and something else I couldn't quite place crossing her face. The air was thick now, every breath feeling too loud in the sudden silence. My wife's eyes shifted from me to the others, her chest rising and falling rapidly, but she didn't say anything. I could see her scrambling for a way out, but the walls were closing in. Her defenses crumbled just a little. I could see it in her eyes. There was no denying it now. She wasn't ready to admit the truth, but she knew I had her. And all of a sudden, the dinner table felt like a courtroom, with her family as the witnesses and me as the one pushing for answers. "What do you think this is?" she asked, her voice low, desperate now. But I wasn't backing down. Not this time. I had to hear it from her. I had to know the truth no matter how much it hurt. I leaned back in my chair, my eyes never leaving hers. The silence was almost suffocating, but I wasn't about to let it slip away. I needed answers, and I would get them no matter how much she tried to dodge. "You've been clearing your chat history every few days," I said, my voice steady, though the weight of the words hung heavy in the air. "I don't need to check your phone. The laptop syncs everything, remember?" Her face twitched, her hand tightening around the strap of her purse as if it might somehow shield her from the reality crashing down on her. "You've been deleting messages, hiding things," I continued, pressing her, watching her every reaction. "What's the point of that if there's nothing to hide?" Zoe, still seated beside me, shifted uncomfortably. She'd been silent, letting the two of us exchange blows, but now she couldn't stay quiet any longer. "Why'd you delete everything? Why all the secrecy?" Zoe asked, her voice cutting through the tension like a knife. My mother-in-law hadn't said a word since I mentioned Gordon's name, but now her brow furrowed deeper. She looked at her daughter, a mix of disbelief and hurt in her expression. It wasn't just me anymore. "You've been acting weird lately," Zoe said, her tone softer but firm. "Always on your phone, never letting anyone see what you're doing." Mom noticed it too. The room felt colder, like every word was chiseling away at the facade she'd built. I could see her shrinking, her walls slowly falling. My wife's gaze flickered to the floor, to her mother, then back to me. She opened her mouth but closed it again, like she was searching for the right lie, the one that would work. But there was no way out. Which version of the story is it then? I asked. First, it's an office party. Then it's crashing at a colleague's house. And now it's drinks and relationship counseling? What next? A just friends excuse. Her jaw tightened, but she didn't speak. She couldn't. The more she stayed silent, the more her family began to see her for what she was. And the more I felt a quiet satisfaction, knowing I was finally bringing the truth to light. She took a deep breath, the weight of her choices hanging in the air. Her hands trembled as she set her purse down on the table, eyes darting between me and her family. The wall she had built up to shield herself finally cracked, and her confession came out in a low, shaky voice. Fine, she said, her voice barely a whisper. I was going to meet Gordon for drinks after the office party. She paused, searching for the words, but they didn't come easily. But it's not what you think. I didn't interrupt. I didn't need to. She was digging herself in deeper, and I wanted to hear it all. It's complicated, she continued, her eyes welling with tears, but she wiped them away quickly as if she didn't want anyone to see. He's going through some stuff with his wife. I've been helping him, giving him advice. I stayed quiet, my gaze fixed on her. Her words didn't add up. They didn't make it right. She wasn't just talking about helping a friend. She was planning to spend the night with him, with his family conveniently out of town. And you thought this was okay? Zoe asked, her voice sharp now, filled with disbelief. Your advice is more than just that, isn't it? My wife's face flushed, but she didn't answer. Instead, she looked at the floor as if she could hide from the truth. Tell me, I said, trying to keep my voice steady, though the anger was creeping in, what was really going to happen there? You were going to have drinks. What then? Stay the night, have a little talk like nothing was wrong? Her silence was all I needed. She wasn't sorry for what she was planning. She was sorry for getting caught. It's not just that, she said, her voice faltering. I've been so lonely. Things with us haven't been right for a while. I felt the sting of those words, but I didn't let it show. So, you thought a night with a married man would fix it? I asked, disbelief coloring my words. That's your solution? She didn't respond right away, and that was enough. The emotional weight of her confession was there, but it didn't erase what had happened. What she had almost done. What she had almost risked losing. Her emotional struggle was clear, but it didn't change anything. It didn't make her actions any less hurtful. It just made the whole situation more complicated. The room fell into an oppressive silence, and I sat back in my chair, feeling the weight of everything she had just said. My wife's words hung in the air, but they didn't make me feel any better. They didn't change what had happened or what had almost happened. The truth was out now, but it didn't feel like a victory. It felt like a defeat. I looked at her, at the woman I'd loved, the woman I thought I knew, and felt something inside me shift. This wasn't about the affair. It wasn't just about what she almost did with Gordon. It was about everything that had led up to this moment. The lies. The deceit. The erosion of trust that had been wearing away quietly, like a constant drip of water slowly carving through stone. I thought about all the times I'd questioned myself, second-guessed my instincts. All the times I'd dismissed the doubt in my head because I didn't want to believe she could do something like this. But now, sitting here looking at the mess we had made of our lives, I couldn't ignore it anymore. The trust we once had was gone. And I knew deep down that it wasn't coming back. It couldn't. I glanced at her family, all of them now fully aware of the situation. Their disappointment was palpable, but it wasn't theirs to fix. It was mine. And I realized as the weight of that truth settled on me, that I couldn't fix this. Not anymore. The years of trying to make it work, of pushing through the cracks, they had led to this, an irreparable break. I stood up slowly, the finality of the decision settling in my chest. This marriage is over, I said, my voice barely above a whisper, but it felt like a thunderclap in the quiet room. My wife's face crumpled, her eyes brimming with regret, but it didn't change anything. I turned away, not looking back. The hardest part wasn't saying the words, it was realizing that they were the truth. I had already let go. Now I just had to live with it. As I walked to the kitchen to clean up, the emotional numbness started to creep in. The anger had settled into something more still, more final. And for the first time in what felt like years, I could breathe. The days that followed felt different, lighter somehow. The silence in the house was no longer filled with tension. No more walking on eggshells, no more wondering what she was hiding. The noise in my head had quieted, replaced by a strange calm that I hadn't expected to feel so soon. I spent the first few days organizing, sorting through the chaos of what was left behind. Her things, her clothes, the remnants of a life we once shared. Each box packed away felt like a small, deliberate step toward letting go, but it wasn't painful. There was no sharp pain, no sense of loss that I had braced myself for. Instead, there was a sense of relief, of clarity, as if a fog I hadn't even realized I was living in had lifted. I didn't think I'd feel this way. I had imagined myself crushed under the weight of what had happened, but instead I was breathing easier. The weight of carrying someone else's choices, someone else's lies, had been exhausting. Now it was over. The decision to end the marriage wasn't about anger or revenge. It was about finally seeing things clearly and realizing that I deserved better than the confusion and dishonesty I'd been living with. I sat at my kitchen table one evening, a cup of coffee in front of me, and realized how different everything felt. The apartment, once a place of unease, now felt like my own again. I could think. I could breathe. I could finally hear my own thoughts without the background noise of doubt and suspicion. It wasn't easy and it wasn't quick, but I had grown. I had accepted that some things, some people, were simply not meant to be a part of my life anymore. And with that acceptance came peace. The divorce was the right decision. It was the only decision. I didn't need to explain it to anyone, and I didn't need anyone's approval. It was my life, and for the first time in a long time, I was living it on my own terms. And that felt good. That felt like freedom. I was ready to move forward. And for the first time in a long time, I was excited about what came next.